Yesterday, many of us spent our day down at Stanley Park serving our community at UC Celebration. So if you're wondering, like, man, did Matt get the worst tan imaginable? Like, that is like extra roasted. Well, that's why. So I was telling some people, hey, it's just how patriotic I am, just red, white, and blue, just extra red. So grateful you guys are here today. Like Max said, we are continuing our series on David and his early years, and to just kind of like set the table for what we're talking about today. My wife, Jen, is terrified of bees. And it all kind of started when she was a little girl. She's in preschool, and they taught her the song Shoo Fly, like Shoo Fly, Don't Bother Me. And she's outside, I guess at recess, and a bee starts flying around her, and she's like, I'm going to use some of the skills I've just learned in the classroom. And so she starts singing Shoo Fly, Don't Bother Me, and starts like swatting at the bee, and it stings her in the eye. Right? Yeah, that's my reaction too. And since then, even as an adult, she is deathly afraid of bees. Like when we were dating, like she would see a bee and she would just like run far away. And my biggest fear as a parent was when we had babies that she would like just instinctively chuck a child at a bee and then run the opposite direction. Thankfully, it only happened once, so we're fine. As you talk to my kids, I'll let you guess which one that is. So this seems to be our reaction to acute fear, though, isn't it? Like we jump, we want to like hide. Often we say something that we wouldn't want to have said in front of our grandmas. And when those things happen, of course, like that is the reaction we have. But there's also another reaction we can have where it moves from a jump scare to something that just doesn't seem to go away. And it's just whenever that happens, your reaction is usually not, whoa, like I just got to get away. It changes things. It's still fear, but it goes from being jumped to something else. Like, I don't know, did you ever have this torture as a child where you did something that you weren't supposed to, and your mom says, just wait until your father gets home. And then for the next 4 hours, your life slows to a crawl. You been there? It's the same thing that happens as an adult when your boss says, we need to have a conversation. And it's just like completely out of the blue. You're like, oh, like I don't know what this is going to be like. And for me at least, it doesn't make me jump. It actually is like the exact opposite feeling where it's like somebody's put glue on the bottom of my shoes, or like I'm wearing a weighted vest with 3 hours of sleep and I've eaten some food that is like way past its expiration, where it's like I don't feel like I can move. I'm a little queasy. Like things are not good. See, because chronic fear, like where it just never ends, it doesn't make you jump. It actually creates a stalemate where you're just kind of frozen still. And this happens to us all the time, and it happens in some like very unique ways. So like some of you might be frozen or in a stalemate because of some golden handcuffs. Like you despise your job. It drains the life out of you. But you're too scared to give it up because what about your salary? What about your benefits? What about your stock options? Like, will those things, not get vested if you leave? Or maybe your fear isn't like golden handcuffs. Maybe it feels like the opposite, where it's an envelope of doom, where you've gotten a bill and it's just sitting on your kitchen counter and you're like, I don't have the money to pay for this. I don't know how I'm going to even do this. And so it just kind of sits there, and every day you pass by, it's a reminder that you should do something and you just can't seem to get there. Or maybe you're in a stage of life where mom and dad should not be driving anymore, and it's a game of chicken with your siblings on who's going to have that very uncomfortable conversation to say, hey, we need the keys. And it's just you're frozen. Or maybe it's like a failure to launch, where you know that there is a new season of life you should be going into, but maybe there's too many options, or sometimes there's too few, and you just feel stuck to the couch. And all you want to do is play video games or watch TV. And the reality is you just feel stuck. What I'm saying is like fear can make us do some crazy things. Instead of doing what we know we should do, what we do instead is we avoid it, we stay frozen. And I think most of us have an area of our life that leads us to just feel paralyzed and kind of stuck in the trenches. Just like I'm not going to move because of fear. And what it kind of feels like is, when your smoke detector like needs new batteries, but it's not like a constant chirp. It's like once every 5 to 10 minutes, it just like, beeps at you or chirps. And it's that obnoxious feel, but the idea of going to the garage and getting a ladder and like getting up there and changing it feels like too much. So you just kind of let it go on a little too long. You think, I can ignore this, I can be fine. But the reality is this, like it starts to grate at you. And it starts to wear you down. And as much as you think you can ignore it and just move past it, it just does not go away. And the reality is, like in life, it's usually not as simple as I can just go and change a battery. It's usually something that is going to require a little bit more metal. And so where does this paralysis come from? It sneaks up on us, I think, when our vision moves from being something vertical to something where I'm only looking horizontal. Like when I'm no longer looking up there, but I'm only looking down here. And to see exactly how this happens, I want to look at one of the most famous stalemates in all of history. Today we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17, and this is a very famous story in the Bible, and many of you who maybe even didn't even grow up in church or haven't really been around Christianity very long, you probably know the bones of this story, but we'll get there in just a second. So today, like I said, we're continuing our series about David and his early years, but right now, at this moment, David is not the king yet. It's Saul, and Saul is still on the throne, but yet the nation is terrified. And the reason why is because their mortal enemies, the Philistines, have lured them into battle, and now they are paralyzed in fear before it starts. So it says in 1 Samuel 17, it says, the Philistines now mustered their army for battle, and they camped between Soko and Judah and Ezekiah at Ephes Dammim. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. Verse 3, so the Philistines and Israelites, they faced each other on opposite hills with the valley between them. So the valley of Elah at this moment there's about a mile like separating these two hills. And you can just picture it's like a stadium. On one side you have the Philistines and their warriors, they're ready to go to battle. And on the other side you have the Israelites. And the thing is, it looks like they're ready for hand-to-hand combat, but it's just not happening. And so it says in verse 4, then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him, carrying a shield. Okay, just time out. This is one of those stories where if you're very familiar with it, you just like, yeah, that's great. If you're newer to this, you're like, a 9-foot giant, like what is this? Well, this is just kind of for the Bible nerds in the room. There's actually a little bit of a debate on how tall Goliath actually is, because in the manuscripts that we translate our Old Testament from, it says he was 6 cubits and a span, which translates to about 9 feet. If you go back to the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament that Jesus and his contemporaries would have read from, as well as the Dead Sea Scrolls, it actually has it as 4 and a span, which would be 6 feet 9 inches tall. Now, whether he was 9 feet or even like close to 7 feet tall, this would have been absolutely terrifying, because the average height for a man in this time period was 5 feet 3 inches. Now, just as an aside, why am I sharing with you, like, hey, well, there's like discrepancies? I'm sharing this with you for a couple of reasons. One, I just want to be fully honest, like, yeah, there's debate between this, but then at the same time as well, biblical scholars, we don't hide from where there are seemingly contradictions between like different manuscripts. And frankly, this is like one of the largest ones where there's like might be a discrepancy. And I just want you to know that when you read your Bible, you can trust it. That there aren't like all of these like hidden, like, well, most people don't say this, or like most manuscripts don't say this. Almost all of the discrepancies that you see are actually small things like measurement or time period, like that kind of stuff that we see right here. So back to the actual story. What we see happening here is it looks like they should be going to hand-to-hand combat, but we don't see that. And why is it? Well, it's because the Philistines practiced a warfare called representative warfare. And what they would do is, rather than sending both armies just going like headlong right into each other, they would send one representative to fight the representative from another nation. The Philistines did this. A lot of other nations around the ancient Near East did this, but this is not what the Israelites did. And so from their perspective, they're like, this is a style of warfare we are not prepared for. That we are going up against a warrior that is like far outmatches any of our best people. And this is scary. It is terrifying. It would be very similar to like, hey, our slow pitch softball team is going to go play the Padres. Like that's what this looks like to them. And like I said, once again, we just have to reflect on how big Goliath would have been. Whether it was 7 feet or whether it is 9 feet, this would have been absolutely terrifying. We don't really respect how tall 7 feet actually is. Because when we see it, it's usually on television, and it's usually in a basketball game, and they're usually playing against a bunch of other very tall people, right? I was at the Dallas airport one day, and I saw both David Robinson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Strangely enough, they were not with each other. It was kind of a funny thing that I saw both of them on the same day. But like I said, they were separate. But you see them they're like head and shoulders above everybody as they walk through the crowds. And you just, it is so much larger than what you actually realize. And the thing is, when it comes to either battle or athletics, height makes a gigantic difference. I am not good at basketball. But when I was 17, I spent the summer in the Philippines, and at that point, I was 5'8", unlike my very tall 5'9" frame today. And I got into these pickup games with these 5'2" Filipino kids, and I just got to be honest, I was murdering all of them. Okay, I have never felt better about myself in my entire life, to the point that here we are, 23 years later, I'm like, let me tell you about my shining moment, okay? And we're playing an 8.5-foot goal. It's one time I'm like, all right. So I dunk it, and I'm this old dude from the side, ooh, Michael Jordan. And I'm like, yes. Absolutely. That is exactly who I am. And the thing is, height makes such a gigantic difference in athletics, right? And it makes just as big of a difference when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. Boxers, they talk about their reach, right? If you've got a boxer with a longer arm than the other, he has a distinct advantage. If you've ever seen Victor Wembanyama on the basketball court, he is like an alien. He is so much taller than everybody else. And so the question in this moment, as the Israelites and the Philistines face off, is who is going to battle against this behemoth? And it says in verse 8, Goliath stood and he shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. Why are you all coming out to fight, he called. I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Who's going to fight him? Nobody. Nobody's going to fight him. Well, who should fight Goliath? Well, I'm glad you're wondering this. Does Israel have anybody who's a warrior, invested in an Israelite victory, and also kind of tall? Well, 8 chapters earlier, we read about their current king, Saul, being chosen to be the king. Why? In part because he stood head and shoulders taller than everybody else. Nobody was equipped to go and fight on behalf of the Israelites more than Saul against Goliath. But where is he? He's in his tent, cowering in fear. What does this signal to the rest of the army when their leader, their fearless leader, is like, I am too scared to try? That means nobody else is going to step forward either. This is in part why we just have to be aware of the people we surround ourselves with. See, the people that you put in your life as examples, they have a profound impact on you. I often call them pace setters, the people that give you permission to either be the best version of yourself or the worst person, or the worst version of yourself. See, when you were a kid, what was your logic to get your mom to let you do stuff? You're like, hey, Brian gets to go, right? Brian has one. Brian is going. That's our rationale for why we should be allowed to do the same thing. And frankly, it doesn't change that much when you're an adult. Why do you give yourself permission to be in debt? Well, it's because, most of my friends, like, they don't think it's a big deal. Like, why do you give yourself permission to get divorced? Well, it's like, well, all my friends, like, that's what they do. Or, why do I give myself permission to just, get completely, like, wasted? Like, well, it's because maybe a mentor did it. Maybe it's a group of friends that does it. Like, you have to be aware, like, who are the people you surround yourself with? See, part of Israel's paralysis in this moment is the one person who should have been leaping forward and saying, I will take on the giant, is frozen still. Yet there's more to it than this as well. See, Saul was paralyzed in fear because he's only looking horizontally. He's only looking what he can see. And he's completely forgetting the vertical, that God has made a promise to his people, that he has made a promise to him that he would fight on their behalf. And so here's the thing, like, the way it looks for us today is that when we look horizontally, right, that means we only see our challenges. You only see what you can do. You only see what is likely to happen. And when you keep your eyes down and you're only looking horizontally, you're going to be transfixed on the giant that stands in front of you. But see, we have to wake up to this reality right here. If you only look at what you can see, you will always be paralyzed by what you can't control. This is why one of our core values here at Canyons is audacious faith, that we trust God no matter what. So we go all in, move by faith, not paralyzed by fear. All right, so David's dad, Jesse, he has 8 sons in total. The 3 oldest ones, they're actually with the Israelite army in the Valley of Elah, and it's been 40 days since this whole thing has started. It's 40 days of the nations squaring off against each other, Goliath coming down, doing his whole song and dance, and nothing actually materializing it. And so Jesse has his youngest son, David, and he is sent to battle to not fight, but just to deliver some cheese and bread to his brothers as well as their officers. And he gets there and he watched the whole thing play out. The Israelite army, they get all their stuff together, they go walking down to the battlefield, they're doing their chants, they're calling on themselves to just muscle up and get their courage, and then the Philistines come out and they meet him. Goliath comes out, he says some very mean things about them, probably their moms, and definitely something about God. And this is their reaction in verse 24. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. I don't care what century it is, this is not a good look for a military, right? Like, it reminds me of that scene in A Christmas Story, where like Ralphie, Schwartz, and Flick are walking, and all of a sudden Scott Farkas and his toady, Grover Dill, pop out, and they're like, rawr, and they just turn around and sprint the opposite way. Like, that's what's happening with the Israelite army. They just like freak the geek out and just run the opposite direction. And so, here's what happens. It says in verse 25, "Have you seen the giant?" the men asked. "He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempted from paying their taxes." All right, like, so how big of a deal is this? I mean, you get to marry the king's daughter. You don't have to pay taxes any longer. I mean, this sounds like a really great deal. But let's just kind of be honest for a second. If you are Saul's daughter, Michelle, and it's been 40 days and nobody's stepping up, you're looking in the mirror and wondering, like, what is wrong with me at this moment, right? Like, nobody will do this, but I digress. So then for the first time in the whole biblical narrative, we actually hear David's voice. It says in 26, David asked the soldier standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel?" And then listen to this part. "Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he's allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" This whole time, the Israelites are focusing on one thing: the size of the giant standing in front of them. And for the first time, it's recorded in the entire story that somebody is concerned about the size of God. What David is doing, he's injecting a little bit of theology into the circumstance. See, we read this pagan Philistine. Maybe your translation would say this uncircumcised Philistine, which, right? Like, what this means is God has a special relationship and special commitment to the Israelites. He does not have that relationship with Goliath. And David's asking the question, man, are we just going to let him defy God in this? And his worldview and his understanding of God's promises to his people, is that we shouldn't be scared because we are essentially the armies of the living God. That this is who we are, that we have supernatural help on our side. And just to be clear, like to this point, David is not actually committed to fighting the giant, but apparently he is the only one in the entire camp who's asking about it. And what happens is word gets around that David is like, he's asking like, hey, what's he saying? You know, like, what's the person going to get? What's it going to take to be the one to go down there? And David's oldest brother, a guy by the name of Eliab, who just a few chapters earlier, we read that when Samuel the prophet comes to anoint the next king of Israel, and he gets there and he just knows it's going to be one of Jesse's sons, he sees Eliab and he's immediately like, that must be the guy. Because apparently he looked like a king, he probably talked like a king, he probably called everybody to attention like a king, but quite famously, God passes over him and instead gives that anointing to his littlest brother, David. And so, from his perspective, he's like, who is this little brother of mine to come out here? And he actually has this whole conversation. And it sounds a lot like, hey, don't you have like 4 sheep at home you're supposed to be watching? Like, who do you think you are? You're coming out here probably just to try and show me up once again. And the reason why I think it's just so significant that this is included is because we probably think as we read this that when David stepped up and said, hey, I will fight the giant, that everybody said, oh, great, we are so thrilled. But he doesn't even have the support of his brother. Like, in some ways, this is having to square off against a Goliath before actually having to fight Goliath. Because it's a lot easier to face challenges and the problems in your life when you know you've got a whole crew of people behind you, like cheering you on and getting excited for you, but David doesn't have anybody. So, word gets back to Saul, the king. Maybe Saul will be excited that somebody's going to step up. And this is what he says. David says to him, don't worry about this Philistine. I will go fight him. Verse 33. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There is no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. Nobody has any faith in David to do this. He does not have the resume. He doesn't have the stature. He's just, the previous chapter, he's described as boyish and like the runt of the family. It says in verse 34, but David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do this to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally, and here's the key word, consented. All right, go ahead, and may the Lord be with you. He's not like excited to send David into battle. It's like he just got worn down. But once again, we see the source of David's confidence. It's not that he's arrogant, it's just he's firmly convinced God is fighting on my behalf. And the thing is, like, I said he doesn't have a resume, and in all fairness, he fights off to some experiences he had in the past. He's like, I've been out in the wilderness, bears and lions, like they've come to try and steal my sheep, and I have defeated them. And we should do the same. Every time God is faithful to you, you need to take note. Take that as an example to build your confidence. See, for David, it didn't matter that seemingly like these moments where God like instilled just his faithfulness in his life was like a part-time summer job out in the wilderness, and he really needs God to come through now that he's in a career. It's the same way I'm saying that for you, if God was faithful to you when you were 16 and your problems were this big, use that as like the step stool to build your confidence that God can still be faithful to you when you're 34 and your problems are this big. But God does not change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And see, the thing is, when you're only looking down here, you say, no, the things are different, right? Like, those were lions, those were bears, but, like, that is a true apex predator in front of me. Like, Goliath is so much scarier. And that's what horizontal thinking will do. But when you will shift your eyes from the horizontal and look to the vertical, you see that, no, God doesn't change, and that when he's faithful to you in those smaller things, that's just the prologue to him being faithful to you in the even bigger things. So what happens is worn down Saul says, great, if you're going to go fight, you got to wear my armor. David tries it on. He's like, this is not going to work. Because what that is man-made defense. That is horizontal thinking human defense. And David says, no, I'm going to fight the Lord's battles without having to use your armor. And he goes out there with just his sling. This is because it's not a slingshot. This is a very deadly weapon that the shepherds would use to, fling rocks at the different predators that would come and try and steal their sheep. And he goes to the river, and he takes 5 smooth stones, and he heads off into battle. And it says in verse 45, David replied to the Philistine, meaning like he's now talking to Goliath, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. Then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. This should change things a little bit when you picture that this is like a punk teenage kid going out there and just yelling at this giant of a warrior. And as you probably know or have guessed by now, Goliath comes sprinting towards David to attack. David counters. He slings a stone at Goliath, knocks him down to the ground, and then it records that he grabs Goliath's sword and he decapitates him. But here's what I want you to know. Vertical thinking isn't concerned with the size of the challenge, but the size of our God. See, nobody wants to admit it, but we often feel like cowards. We're frozen in fear, just lacking the courage to act. And truth is, if it relies solely on you, you know what? Maybe staying frozen isn't a bad idea. Remember Randy lay there like a slug? It was his only defense, Christmas Story, 1983. You are finite. And finite people, they lose. Finite people get themselves into trouble when they put a lot of faith in themselves and they don't consider what the consequences are going to be. But here's the difference. If God has called you to act, you're no longer operating like a finite being. You have an infinite God behind you. And I know a lot of what I just said is platitudes, they're cliches. Let's get specific. What has God called you to do? And some of you are like, yeah, I don't really feel like I've ever had like a very clear purpose placed in my life. But I'll just tell you right now, if you are a follower of Jesus, God isn't trying to like hide this in some like mysterious cover so that you have to search your whole life just trying to find what that purpose is. He actually gets kind of clear. In fact, if you read 1 Thessalonians and go to chapter 4, you'd read that like God's will for your life is actually very clear. And the term uses, it's your sanctification. It's becoming more like Jesus. So let's just kind of look at how this can play itself out, right? If God is calling you to set aside the destructive parts of your past and move towards him with abandon, he is going to give you the power needed. So we know God is completely honest. There is no lying in him. And we should practice total honesty because of it. That's what it looks like to be like Christ. You might be tempted to fudge the truth every now and then to make things easier, either relationally or financially or otherwise. But be confident. God has called you to be honest, and he will give you the strength needed to do that. You might have a boyfriend or a girlfriend who's pressuring you to go further sexually than you should go. Or maybe you're married and there's somebody at work that's giving you a little bit more attention than you really should have. I want you to know, God has called you towards purity. Be confident in your calling to be more like Jesus. Trust him with the consequences of just, hey, if I do the right thing, that he will honor that. Maybe your giant is like a cultural pressure where everybody's trying to get you to morph and to change, and you just know you need to be who God has called you to be. And the truth is, it's not going to be by just digging deeper and just finding your true self. It is trusting that the God has called you to do that is going to give you the power and the ability to do it. See, the moral of the story is not dig deep because David always beats Goliath. It's not true. Goliath crushes David regularly. It happens all the time. The solution for us, though, is shifting our focus from a horizontal viewpoint to a vertical one. It's shifting to the things that Christ is calling you to do. But at the same time, here's some other lessons just from David's battle against Goliath that I think that we should take note of. The first is we need to shift our sights from down here to up there. So you have to seek counsel from the Bible, the Holy Spirit, other followers of Jesus. Pray regularly. Fill your mind with things that turn your thoughts to God and not your problems. Here's the second thing. Chronicle the times that God has come through. David cited his victories over the lions and the bears, and frankly, we should do the same. God has a track record in your life. Write it down. Talk about it. Stop trying to reason it away. When God's faithful in little things, that's just a prologue to him being faithful in bigger things. See, when I have challenges here at the church, I have to remind myself all the time, I prayed for this. Quite literally, a few years ago, before I even knew you existed, Jen and I are praying about what our next steps in life were going to be, and we're praying for God to open up the doors to come to a church in San Diego. In fact, I remember every now and then, we actually prayed to come to a neighborhood just like this one, geographically, everything else, and God opened those doors. And then what happened? Well, thank you. Not what I was looking for. But every time we face challenges, God has been faithful to bring people, resources, everything else along the way. And so often I'm like, man, God, what are you doing? How are you going to overcome this? And the truth is, his past faithfulness is just the prologue to his future faithfulness. This is what God does in my life and yours. I am not special. God has that same commitment to you. Here's the other thing. You need to embrace your inadequacy. See, what Saul tried to do is get David to put on his armor. Saul was desperate for David to engage the enemy using horizontal logic. But David said, no thanks. And God intentionally steers David into this battle looking completely outmatched. There's no heavy plating, there's no blade, just the tool of a simple shepherd. And I bet that a lot of you are facing challenges right now where you feel completely and totally outmatched and unqualified. Maybe you lack the bank account, the personality, the credentials. You don't have whatever it is you think is required to win. You're exhausting yourself trying to squeeze into Saul's armor, just banking on your personal hustle, your impressive resume, or your own cleverness to solve it. And the truth is, it's just probably not going to be enough. You have to embrace that inadequacy. Now, I share all that, and then this is the real exclamation point of everything we just read. The story of David versus Goliath is actually the foreshadowing of a greater champion destroying a giant that has plagued God's people. See, here's one of the challenges whenever any pastor or Sunday school teacher, whoever it is, gets up and talks about David and Goliath, is that we can often say, yeah, I want to be David. I feel like I'm outmatched, and I got these big challenges, and I just want to dig deep, and I want to overcome. But really what the story is supposed to lead us to see is that we want to be the hero, but truth is we're really not David in the story. That we're actually more like the Israelites. That we're cowering in fear, we're stuck in our tents as we watch this whole thing on display because we're so consumed with everything horizontally that we can see. And then thankfully, a champion steps forward. That David is actually just the precursor to a greater champion in the form and the name of Jesus. And although the giant in front of him looked intimidating and was undefeated at that moment, that sin and death had plagued humanity since the garden. What we see instead is Jesus comes forward, and maybe not with a stone and a sling, but with his arms spread wide and nailed into the cross. He defeats both giants standing in our way. And just like the representative warfare where one person's victory gives victory to us all, as David cuts off the head of Goliath, all of those cowering Israelites were able to come out of their tents and take the victory formation on the field. The same way that as Jesus comes victoriously out of the grave, all of us share in that victory as well. Sin, death, eternal separation has come out to mock us. But our champion has stepped forward, and he's won the battle. We didn't earn it, And just like Eliab, many of us mocked Jesus as he went to the front lines. But within his infinite grace, he has given victory to us all. And this is the gospel. We were completely ill-equipped. We didn't have the ability. If it was up to us, we would lose every time. But Christ laid down his life for us. And while we were still sinners, while we were still cowering in our tents, he died for us, and he gives us life. Let's pray. God, I want to pray right now for the people of Canyons as they're facing challenges, that God, that we would look first not to ourselves to solve, but rather that we would look to your Son as he went forward on our behalf, as he put down the giant of sin and death. God, as he gave victory to us all. I pray for the people who are here that we would taste it, that we would feel it, that we would see it, that God, it would change us, that it would give us a passion that we just didn't know that we needed. God, I pray for those who have been following you for a long time, but have just been cowering in fear, feeling like they just don't have what it takes. But God, you remind them that, yeah, that might be true, but your Spirit in them can give them the victory that they need. God, I pray for those who are just considering and thinking about what it means to be a follower of Jesus, that you would take them across the goal line, Lord, that you would give them the prayer of, Lord, I need you to forgive me of my sin. I need you to take full control of my life. That God, I'm asking you to be my Lord and Savior, to be the champion that fights for me, to be King Jesus. And God, I pray that we wouldn't be paralyzed in fear any longer, that because of the victory guaranteed to us on the cross, that we would go forward into life, trusting and believing that you are with us every step of the way. I pray in your Son, Jesus' name, amen.